Hi, and welcome to week 8 of English 2332. For today's video, we're going to focus just on Plato's The Allegory of the Cave, or the Parable of the Cave, and we'll save the other reading assignment for tomorrow's video. But, hey, we finally got here. This is really, in a lot of ways, the high point of the semester, because this is, of course, a philosophical treatise, a philosophical foundation, as well as a thought experiment, as well as just something to make you think. Now, let me point out something to you. It's probably pretty already obvious to you, but you really can't get the story if you don't read the story. It's not long. It's about 6 pages. But if you're trying to watch a video or an AI summary or trying to skim or something, you're not going to get enough of the details to really understand it. Plus, I've watched some of the videos, and some of the videos just get it wrong. I mean, I'm not sure why, but I mean, you can look at the story and it says, okay, there's a screen that divides puppeteers from the audience, and in the video, there's no screen. So I do encourage you to find the thing that will help you understand it, whether it's a video or a summary or whatever. But as always, go back to the source material, read the original. So anyway, this is Plato, a famous philosopher. His teacher was Socrates. Plato opened up, as you know, the first gymnasium, the first building dedicated toward education. Socrates was also an educator slash philosopher. And Plato got a lot of his stuff from Socrates. Socrates was the genius, Plato was the student, but Plato wrote it all down. I don't think Socrates wrote anything. Let's see. Okay. An interesting point is that both Socrates and Plato believed that humanity should be ruled by kings. That every place should have kings, but they have to be the right kind of kings. They have to be philosopher kings. They have to be kings who are enlightened. And both of these men consider themselves to be enlightened and royalty. So they were basically promoting themselves as a candidate to be king with absolute power. And nobody to second guess or no Supreme Court to contradict them or anything like that. So anyway, so you got Plato telling us the story of Socrates. And of course, Socrates is dead when he wrote the book called The Republic. This is one chapter out of that book. And so he's using his name as one of the main characters. Glaucon, or Glaucon, is Plato's brother, I think. But, and while it's a dialectic, while it's a dialogue, Glaucon doesn't really do much other than agree. He does throw up the occasional question, but most of the time it's just like, most certainly, absolutely, of course, what else? So anyway, just consider that. So anyway, so you got Socrates explaining basically not education, but enlightenment, which is a little ironic because the first sentence says, at this point, I will show you something about the nature of education and ignorance. But he's not really talking about education. He's really talking about enlightenment. And we'll talk about the difference. One of the things that the ancient Greeks believed, and I'm not exactly sure if Socrates believed this or not, but a lot of them did, they believed that every human being was born knowing everything, that you couldn't really teach anyone anything because they already knew it. They simply had a hard time remembering it. For example, you're talking to a little 4-year-old kid and you say, what is 2 plus 2? And he says, 12. No. What is 2 plus 2? Banana. No. What is 2 plus 2? 4. That's right. See, you knew that all along. I just had to help you remember it. We no longer hold with that philosophy, but that's kind of how they saw the human mind back then. So anyway, so you got this dialogue between Socrates and Glaucon, and they're talking about what if. And you see that a lot. Those what if verb constructions. And he says, what if a group of people were chained in a cave and their only source of light was a fire behind them, behind a screen, and in front of the screen there was some other people holding up puppets. And don't forget, the cave would have been completely dark other than the fire. This is a cave that's way down deep in the earth. And the back of the cave wall is not like a smooth projector screen or a smooth white wall like we have in the classrooms. It would have been very, very uneven and uncertain. The fire produces an unflickering light. The sound bounces at weird angles off the cave walls. So you get a lot of mangled sensory impressions. But anyway, the other thing to remember is this, is that to those people who are chained in the chairs who can't look left or right, the shadows on the wall, the shadows of those models, and we don't know if they're clay models or wooden models or what, but they're models of trees and horses and everything in the world. But to them, it's not the models that are reality. They can't see the models. All they can see is the shadow that's projected on there by the firelight. The shadows are their reality. To them, that's what reality is. So he says, what if some of these people were set free, and would they escape? No. They would have to be dragged up to the surface, a very slow and painful process. What do you suppose he's talking about? A slow and painful process. Learning, education. Learning takes time. I'm not sure I would consider it painful, but at least not like you're being dragged up the floor of a cave. But it does take a while, and in some ways it can be uncomfortable. And then he goes on to say, well, and of course, when you first get outside, after spending a lifetime in a dark cave, you can't see anything because the light just floods your eyes. Then eventually the person who's released begins to see shadows, and he mistakes those shadows for reality. Then the things begin to take form, and he feels of a tree. And he says, oh, this is reality. And he begins to experience it with all of his senses, and he understands what is reality. Then he says, if this man were to go back and try to free his other friends who are still chained up, they would kill him. Why? Well, of course, you know that Socrates was killed for trying to teach the youth of Athens to question their political leaders. So that's got to tie into that someplace. But anyway, it's a really, really good story, and I encourage you to read it and look for the details. It does talk a lot about leadership and about politics and about the very nature of reality. Another thing to remember here is that Socrates believed in something called the theory of forms. And what he basically said about the theory of forms, theory is a belief or an idea, is that his idea or belief was that nothing is real. This is not a real remote control. This is just the image of a remote control. This is just my perception of a remote control. And that nothing is real. Everything simply is form without substance. And if you're deep into philosophy, you might enjoy this. It's a little bit deep for me. Ask Dr. Couch, your philosophy professor. He'll be able to explain this to you better. There is one thing I always cover with my students when we're going over this. Sharks. As you know, sharks are these marvelous eating machines, and they are simply created to do nothing but swim and eat. One of the things that some sharks have is along their lateral side, their dorsal side, they have a row of sensory receptors which can detect electrical impulses. And they are so good, these senses are so good at detecting these impulses, they can tell the difference between a healthy fish and a sick or injured fish. This helps them track down their prey, again, which makes them a perfect eating machine. But I bring that up to students to point out that there are senses out there which we as human beings don't have, which we find it very hard to understand because we don't have them. When we talk about how many senses human beings have, most people would agree that we have 5 human senses: sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste. Although you could add thermal, we can detect cold and heat, or depth perception as a different type of sense. But anyway, we have a very limited number of senses or sense organs. But suppose we had more sense organs, or sense organs that no one has dreamed of yet. We could perceive our universe in totally different ways. Even our vision. And huge percentage of our information comes in through our eyeballs. But even our eyeballs can only detect a very, very narrow range of the visual spectrum. We can't see into the ultralight or down into the opposite end of the spectrum. So there's a lot of light that we can't even see. And who knows what else is out there that we cannot perceive or detect or understand because we lack the physical ability to do so. Our understanding of our universe is limited by our perceptions. So anyway, read the story, enjoy it, think about what it's saying, ponder it, discuss it, see what others have to say about it, and if you have questions, let me know.